Добрый день, давайте приступим к нашей сессии и потихоньку будем рассаживаться также в зале. Меня зовут Кирилл Никитин, я буду вести эту сессию. Наша сессия посвящена эффективности бюджетной политики мегаполиса. Я, наверное, начну с того, что приглашу и постепенно попрошу занять...
Please take your seats. We will then discuss the agenda and how we're going to organize the discussion. The purpose of this panel discussion is to review the budget policies, to analyze the sufficiency of budget policies from different angles. And in fact, we asked our panelists to make a presentation. To speak about this, we start with Maxim Reshetnikov, head of the Department for Economic Policies and Development in the Moscow city government. We will also like to talk about the efficiency of budget policies, about the budget policies from the viewpoint of the experts community. The authors of the Strategy 2025, Andrei Klimenko, will speak about that. We also would like to listen to representatives from other countries to talk about their experience. We've invited Richard M. Daly, a champion, former mayor of Chicago, who has been mayor of Chicago for over 20 years and associated with such large-scale projects as Mega Park. Then we also would like to discuss this from the viewpoint of our businesses. The budget policies, as you understand, are an important component of businesses. Alexander Lukin, Deputy Director of Board of Directors of Glavstroy, a major Russian construction company. Well, talking about the budget policies, it would be interesting also to discuss the target audience. Tatiana Grekova, the member of the Municipal Assembly Presnensky Budget Finance Commission. So what exactly would like to discuss in this panel discussion? There are 10 items that I want to focus on right now, and I would like to hear your viewpoints on that. And I'm confident that we will be able to hear these different viewpoints and different reports. Strategy 2025, first of all, the different options for this strategy, focusing on the use and how it's going to be implemented in the city's budget policies. The key beneficiaries of these budget policies now and in the future. That's the first question that we would like to discuss. We would also like to talk about the program methods, program-based approaches in the city budget, the pros and cons, the balanced budget, expenses or revenues, non-tax revenues of the budget. What exactly can be done about that? Shall we try to somehow increase them due to taxation, new taxation policies? The budget deficit, whether it's can be allowed to finance programs and changes, the urban changes, achieving our strategic goals at the expense of future generations, or probably at the expense of financing other regions or the sale of the city property. So the next question that can be of quite interest, maybe I will talk about this, the tax policies of the city and the federal policies in this respect, expanding the authority of the city administration in this area. The next issue, the key donors of the city budget, businesses, companies, factories, our major taxpayers in the tax system on the federal and municipal level, or probably our citizens, our residents. So this is a kind of dilemma. We would like to hear different viewpoints on that. There's another subject, such as mentality of the responsible taxpayer of an urban resident. Well, it's probably high time to create a kind of a link between the mentality, the mindset of the urban dweller as a consumer of municipal services who want to get as much as possible, and the urban resident in his capacity of a taxpayer that is capable of understanding the price of such services. So different budget decisions, how these decisions can be involved in the decision-making process. So I think the local self-government viewpoint on that would be quite interesting. The approaches to budgeting and financing the local self-government, including different options and the kind of changes that can be undertaken in this area. So that's a rough outline of our agenda, the questions that we're going to touch upon in this discussion. I'm sure there will probably some other issues that we're going to discuss. So now let's get down to this discussion. So we will have first two keynote speakers, Mr. Reshetnikov and Mr. Daly. So they will have 15-minute presentations, whereupon I will give the floor to our co-speakers, and so there will be kind of a free exchange of opinions with questions from the audience. We will also have a few provocative, as we think, issues that will be put to voting. You'll have some kind of mobile devices looking like cell phones. Using these devices, you will be able to vote to give certain answers during our voting procedure. So let's start our discussion. Maxim Reshetnikov. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, let me welcome everyone who attended this session. I understand there are fans of the budget process here and those who understand the importance of this process. So in order to give priority to this session over other panel discussions, let me tell you that and when we talk about different priorities in the strategies, if there are no priorities, that means that there are no such priorities, because our budget session, budget panel discussion is very important, highly important. Let me talk about the ways how we can resolve our strategic task facing the city using the budget policy. So would like to say thanks to Kirill for the exhausted list of questions. So finally we will be able to find out who has killed John Kennedy, so to say. So I think all these budget issues will be covered by the budget policies of the Russian Federation. So what I would like to note at this point, that the city is now facing some challenges, and let me talk about this right now. So we have to note at this point and to understand that these are not unique challenges. These are the challenges that the European cities, American cities have been facing over the last 2 or 3 decades. They're trying to resolve them gradually, and so this path that we're supposed to traverse is not unique. So we'll have to trot along this path in our own manner. But I'm sure that there are no such problems that have not been faced by other cities elsewhere. So it's quite important for us to see the positions of our colleagues. So we're looking forward to Mr. Daly's presentation, because I would like to hear to comment on the problems that he has been facing in this area. So what are the challenges faced by Moscow over the last 2 years? I mean, in the budget area. If you allow me, I will start with the challenges in the income, in the revenue portion of our budget, and also the oil and gas rent that is due to the new law on taxation and transfer pricing. As you know, Moscow this year has lost about 100 billion rubles, about 8% of the actual taxable base, which is quite a sizable amount, and it's a real test for any city of such scale. So the loss of this oil and gas rent, this could happen one way or the other, but as usual, the winter has come unexpectedly, and there are no other options right now facing us. We have to balance, meeting this challenge is trying to streamline the policies of mutual expenses, I would say. On the other hand, we understand how we can deal with this challenge, how to resolve these problems, and the priority here is definitely the substitution of the cascading oil and gas revenues with the property, real estate tax, physical entities test, talking about the so-called high-income population level, so the small businesses taxation, because as we've heard already, the small businesses are very reluctant to pay their taxes. So we've already pulled efforts today in this area. So actually, our policies related to streamlining the situation in the rental market. The aims of these policies are not always fiscal aims, but sometimes they are related to the issues of security of our citizens, and also we will also talking about some fiscal aims here as well, as we are counting on the growth of such revenues in this area. So we have just approached the issue of real estate taxation. So the next issue will be devoted to questions related to taxation of real estate transactions, because it's an open secret that taxes in this area are not paid in full, and we are discussing certain initiatives with the tax service in this area. I have to note also that we have done a step towards small businesses, as we provided an opportunity for small businesses to pay their taxes in a legal way under a taxation system that creates quite favorable conditions for small businesses, and we are expecting some response from small businesses in this area. And answering one of questions put by Kirill, we see an increase in non-tax revenues. Actually, the duties from land rent have grown up to 2 billion rubles. Also, our revenues are increasing through the rental of real estate, and so we see quite a lot of opportunities in terms of getting more revenues in the city budget. So from the viewpoint of these revenues, and that's what Kirill mentioned, that's a generation of a model of a responsible taxpayer that will help us to move forward on a more reliable basis as compared to the oil and gas rental mechanism. In the meantime, talking about our expenditures, we have to talk about the next challenges faced by the city. So that's one of the global challenges facing our city right now. So we've stated already when we were developing our strategies that the city is not capable of retaining, keeping the population that here it really needs if our city really wants to become the world center. The problem is that given the high immigration attractiveness, unfortunately, we are attracting a certain portion of migrants, a certain layer of the incoming migrants, losing as qualified, skilled workers, the people who are not satisfied with the environment that has been created in recent time, and in fact they are preferring to move to more developed European cities, and that's where we see a real outflow of skilled personnel. So that's one of the challenges facing our budget policies, as we need to create this kind of city environment that would be more attractive to skilled people. So there's another challenge that we're going to face within the next decade is the aging of our population. So proceeding from the demographic structure available currently. So Moscow will lose over 10% of the able-bodied population. So the aging portion of the population will increase in the meantime. That will definitely affect the jobs, the number of jobs, and we'll have to think about the substitution of this workforce, this manpower. So we'll have to find answers to all these questions. No doubt there are problems that are not external, but rather inherited from the policies that have been pursued over the last 10 years, is the underinvestment of urban structures, such as the transport infrastructure. Between 2007 and 2009, Moscow built 11 million square meters of housing, while reconstructing only 15 kilometers of roads. So we have planning to introduce 45 kilometers next year, but which is quite obvious that at a certain point in time the city had quite a high degree of capital investment in the budget, in the transport infrastructure. Nevertheless, these funds have fell a long way short of the actual money that is needed to cover the imbalances, and that's what we are facing right now as we find ourselves in everyday traffic jams. So this is one of the challenges that we have to resolve in the nearest 5 to 10 years, and we are forced to make some steps in this direction to do something about this right now. So talking about what has been done today and the measures that we have been undertaking over the last 2 years, in the midterm budget up to 2015, we have generated quite a high degree of investment expenses. Out of 3 billion expenditure budget, over 500 billion, the investment program, about 31% of the budget expenses are allocated for investments, which is a characteristic of a fast-growing city. But nevertheless, we still have these imbalances right now. Apart from that, the city has invested about 200 billion rubles in the creation of a better city environment, which is quite important for the younger people. So today we're saying that what is most important today is the increasing the quality of the urban environment, not in certain spots of the city, but the total city environment across the entire city. The city yards program, park renovation program, recreational places, road network, not only on government highways, but across the entire city again. And we've made investments in this area as well, apart from capital investments that are scheduled for next year. So we are saying that the challenges related to the fact that we cannot keep the creative class of people, we cannot make these people stay here, because we need them to qualitatively improve the city environment. But we should not flatter ourselves. We understand that changes need more time. That's why we would not be able to resolve all these problems within 1 or 2 years. What is important in this sense is to know that given the current situation, one of the deficit resources, one of the shortages, probably even more than time and money, is the deficit of social trust and the social imbalances in the society. That's why we have to approach this very carefully, because as we hear criticism in our area, so we believe that some of this criticism may be quite justified. But nevertheless, the Moscow government is trying to do everything in its power, because I have to reemphasize once again that the 2 billion rubles that we spend on social support is truly a creation of this sort of trust resources that allow us to move further in all directions. That's why we have to understand that these changes in the budget policy cannot be implemented for this particular reason, so very conservative in this particular area.
And we were accurate in treating respective articles and items. Without any doubt, with all that set of challenges and constraints, led us to the situation that next year's budget will be a deficit one, less than out of 200 billion rubles deficit. We're going to borrow 110 billion rubles, and so by doing so, we have addressed the challenge of borrowing. We believe it is quite reasonable. On the other hand, we don't have any illusions, and we understand that those assets that we are building now, they will give us some negative effect, they will give a positive effect in the near term. If you build more subway lines, you have to pay a lot. You have a lot of expenses, but as times passes by, we will be getting more and more revenues. So for some period, we need to borrow, despite the fact that Moscow enjoys favorable lending rates. And another point has to do with the efficiency of our spendings. That's the frequently asked question on the part of both experts and the citizens, and we keep on asking that questions ourselves. Here we can see two major avenues to improve and enhance efficiency. That's the administrative control, and the budget is built with the due regard to all governmental or federal programs. I'm not saying that all those programs are perfect, but at least they feature all clear-cut objectives, targets, although it's not always that we are able to achieve all those aims. But we are very open. We work in the mode of open government, and it is even more important for us to establish good communications and interaction with the Muscovites, and we see two ways to do that. That's the self-governance is one means, and respective amendments were introduced into the legislation of the Moscow city. And the Moscow legislators authorized a high degree of control in spendings from the budget. I think my colleague Tatiana will give you more details on that machinery, but we also think that it's only the first step, and we will prepared to do more and more in order to streamline the system. And secondly, those are our direct links, direct ties with the Muscovites. And over the past year and a half, we have launched a number of websites, and a Muscovite can visit those sites and leave their responses concerning life in individual neighborhoods and individual condominiums, and that made the life of our subcontractors more difficult. And it concerns renovation of buildings, it concerns cleaning of streets, and because now those subcontractors are under full control on the part of the public, and they are fully accountable for all their wrongdoings. And we can see that it improves the efficiency of all those operations. And we cannot see any bright future unless we promote all those institutions of self-governance furthermore. Dear colleagues, within my time slot, I could speak only very briefly on all those problems and challenges. I think that more questions can be answered during the Q&A time. Thank you. I don't think that they left any pending issues, so you've covered them all. And I can only make a comment building a bridge to one of the subsequent presentation by Andrei Vitalyevich. Looking into the 2025 strategy, I was intrigued by the fact that when we speak of the age categories of the citizens, we always think that aging is a negative trend. It's another stress for the budget. But in Miami or Montreux and some other European and US cities, it is no problem, and I think we can hear on that from other speakers, and I think we can turn the floor to Mr. Daly, and that's kind of an additional question. I mean, are those retired people quite soluble or quite well-off people? And we are really afraid now of that aging trend, but probably in 10 or 15 years, that negative trend will turn into a positive one. But that's the question that I'm going to tackle further on. And now I'm turning the floor to the person who was elected 7 times as the Chicago mayor, and he is a prominent person for a lot of initiatives that radically changed in the urban planning and the urban image of Chicago. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm very proud to be here at the Urban Forum and to meet members on the dais who have their perspective dealing with Russia and Moscow and other parts of the world. But most importantly, I want to describe what the United States is. The United States was formed, the national government was formed by states, 13 states. Then in turn, the states formed cities. It did not come out the national government, the federal government. And so we have a much closer relationship to states and not to the federal government. And when you talk about a budget for a mayor, it's just like a private executive in a business. That is a blueprint. That is what you have to do, is basically balance the budget. And you know that each year, the first of the year, in my perspective, the mayor of the city of Chicago manages the airports, runs the airports, the fire, the police, the schools, all the public schools and junior colleges, public transportation, and libraries. And so we have, it's called a home rule. We exempt ourselves from state governments. Much of the problems of cities dealing with state government, we exempted ourselves. And I was a member of the Illinois Constitutional Convention many years ago in the 70s. We did that purposely to make sure that Chicago is almost like a city-state. Then in turn, the budget is a blueprint. That is a priority set down by your administration, the mayor, listening to the people in the business community. What are your priorities this year? And they change each year. When I was elected in 1989, we had a budget crisis by the past administration. I didn't go in there blaming them. You got elected mayor, do your job. Just do your job. Don't be blaming people. And then in turn, you set the course of the city in regards to the future of the city. And those are the priorities. And what you do is basically, I privatize much of the operation, cost effectiveness, outsourced it, and watched the cost. We leased public assets for the public good. And the public good is short-term and long-term investments, such in public schools, such as human resources for 5 or 10 years. We basically streamline government. The highest cost of local government is fire and police. So you have to bring technology into fire and police. If you don't, your cost keeps going up each year. So besides London, we have the largest concentration of cameras. Cameras solve crime faster than the police. It takes a picture of someone, an incident in a corner. It takes a license plate. It takes a car. It's very difficult when you interview people what an offender looked like. If you have 5 people or witnesses, they have 5 different descriptions of the offender. So you have to get into each department and find out, are they cooperating with one another? Are they consolidating with one another? We formed the Public Building Commission, which is the building arm of city government, which is really separate, a separate board that I appoint, and basically hiring architects, engineers outside of government that does all the construction and much of the remodeling of the city of Chicago. You save an enormous amount of money. Instead of going through bureaucracy, which each government has, eliminate that type of bureaucracy. And so it eliminates very rapidly. So what you have to do is, when you have your public hearings, which we held every year, you listen to communities and what they want. Of course, they want more. Then you set your priorities. And each year, many times, your priorities is set. But when you get the one issue that concerns them, like homelessness, you run a program not just for 1 year, but you run a program for 5 or 10 or 15 years out, so that the basic gives you the present day operation, then the vision that you need. And then you have to basically, how do you balance your government? The United States has lived in debt. Our federal government is in debt. They have never balanced the budget. They can print money and they can borrow. And so what happened to America? If they can do it, why can't anyone else do it? And so that was the problem psychologically in America. So that's why many people went in debt. They over-purchased their homes, the values were too high, and now we're living in reality. And now you see this fiscal cliff they talk about. It was created by the federal government. It was not created by anyone else. So that's their responsibility. And so what you have to do in the budget policy is be able to borrow sometimes. Because if you're borrowing the money to build presently, which I did for schools, what's more important than anything else in schools is a learning environment. But if you look at the cost of a school, if it's only open 6 hours a day, it's not used in the afternoon, it's not used on weekends, it's not used during vacation, summer, then that's basically not a good investment. So what we did is we extended the hours, the school day, and what we did is after-school programs. We outsourced after-school programs. Cultural programs, sports, technology, homework, mentors. And then we started including after-school programs on Saturdays. And during the summer, which I don't know why we give our children 2.5 months off. Think of that. If you go to China, they don't take 2.5 months off for their students on education. And I call it a learning environment. A learning environment education is in the home, places of worship, in the community, and within the city itself. And so what I did is, example, when I took over the schools in '95, I said, why don't we teach languages? We started teaching Russian, Arabic, and Chinese. We don't have many Russians. We don't have a large contingent of Arabs. We don't have a large contingent of Chinese. Because I want to give the children of Chicago of this century a better viewpoint of the world and be able to work for global companies. If you only learn, if you have one language today, it doesn't give you opportunities to work in a global world. And that's what you have to do. And so those are little things you did. And basically looking at schools as a learning environment. Every child learns differently. And so the budget of the city of Chicago has to be able to cooperate with one another. It can't be city colleges, our elementary high schools, our fire, police, airports, planning, they all have to work together. If they don't, the cost of government keeps going up. And so you represent the city. And the citizens said, you're raising my taxes? How can I live in my city? And so you have to make it more livable, more affordable. And then the more private sector you get in, it costs the city less for a private sector to come in, because they're not demanding as much as anyone else. If they're building a business, they have their own security indoors. They basically, they clean the streets, they clean the sidewalks. Basically, it costs you less for developments for business. And so what you do is a complement. You want business to expand. At the same time, it basically lessens the cost for the citizens. And when you look at the budget, you have to figure out how cost-effective your operation is to one another. And that requires not micromanaging, that requires the budget operation to be working full-time year with each department, dealing with their overtime, dealing with their expenditures, dealing with their technology costs. And because if you look at each department has their own technology. Now that's, you consolidate, you start consolidating things. And if you don't do that, then your cost of government keeps going up. But we have the same issues with our national governments. You know, they tell us what to do, but they give us no money. So in the fiscal cliff, the governors and mayors of the United States are getting together and said, we don't want any more money, get rid of our mandates. They mandate the cost local governments. And that is a trend when it takes place, local governments can't succeed. And then you're too dependent off the national governments. And so America's going through a great transition. but in the long run, the megacities of the world will be the economic and political power. Because the national governments, if you take megacities right now, they're bigger than 70% of countries in the world now. It's amazing. And they're going to keep expanding. They're going to keep expanding because people want to come to a city. It's always been like that in the last 100 years. And if you look at China and what's happening here, you're not taking 100 years, you're doing it basically in 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And that is massive. But in the long run, it would be best for the world. And high density is environmentally friendly. We did more environmental work in Chicago. We worked with the business community. We said, let's sit down and work, talk about the environment, how it helps the city, how it helps your business and your employees. This idea that business should be always constantly fighting with government, then global businesses will find any place in the world to do business. I'd be very frank. They can do it any place. And they can have a small office in Moscow, they can have a small office in Russia, and they can do business here. But you want them to do more than just having an office here. You want value. You want them to add basically value to the jobs, basically help the people improve their skills. Same thing in America. What's happened to manufacturing? If you sit in this room right now, if your parents worked in manufacturing, they didn't tell you as a young man or a young woman that you're going to work in manufacturing. Simple as that. In my growing up, I grew up near the Chicago stockyards. Not one of my friends' parents talked about them ever working in the stockyards. So today, when we talk about manufacturing, it's really technology. It's a technology park. It's a technology building. It isn't what we perceive as manufacturing 50, 100 years ago. That is changing rapidly. So you can't lose your manufacturing and say we're going to be a service city because everybody's going to be service. You want to be able to create a technology manufacturing. What does Russia have? Math, science, and engineers. You can create a technology not only can be used here in manufacturing, but used all over the world. And that's what you have to find out what you want to be. But the cities have to look at that because you have a piece of the puzzle of the national governments. You have everything in the city. It kind of reflects the whole country. And so how you deal with it, dealing with your budget, is the priority set down. And that is the major. No one has enough money. We know that. But you plan and you envision when you implement. I believe in public-private partnership. I think the private sector must step up in emerging markets in cities over the years that have many difficulties. I've been a proponent in the city of Chicago. We have leased our airports, we have leased parking garages, everything. But you take that money and put long and short-term investments, and then you put in human hard infrastructure and human infrastructure over 10 or 15 years. You don't spend it all at once. So you basically move it along. Then you complement your budget constantly, dealing with what your priorities are, dealing with the leasing of public assets. But the private sector is the key if you're going to make any changes in government. Because the private sector, if you look at the private sector, what they've accomplished, then you take what they've done and you apply it to city government. And then you allow the private sector to grow because of cost efficiency and effectiveness. And to me, that's why Chicago's greatest asset has been the business community. Besides its people, has been the business community with a not-for-profit, has worked on every major issue of our city. If you don't look at them as an asset, that doesn't mean you're going to have difference of opinion. But I found out that the experts they have in there and the quality of workforce then complements what you want to do in your budget. And the budget is the beginning, the end of any administration or the private sector.
Спасибо. Спасибо. Я думаю, что мы услышали.
Well, I think we've just heard what was very interesting and quite that we've heard a different viewpoint. On overseas viewpoint, we can talk about different points outlined by Mr. Daley, but let's remember what he started with. He started by saying that Chicago, as a municipal formation, surrounded by different other municipal formations, generating this kind of conglomeration. This is quite interesting, the programs of development and so on and so forth. So all the authority is in Chicago is derived from the rights of this state. And it's not only from top to bottom, from this or bottom up, but the similar attitude that we are surprised to see when we watch American policies towards the national government, the federal government, which sometimes, in response to different claims, receives court claims from different states, which say that they go beyond their authority. I liked very much what you said about those factory workers who tell their children that the children will say that they will going to work at the same factory, the same plant. So I understand, since your father was a mayor as well, so probably he told you the same thing at a certain point in time. But unlike in the factories, 22 years, I think it was not just the desire of your father, but probably the desire of your electorate, rather, in Chicago. So that's why we can talk about how, in conditions of such electoral system, different interests have to be taken into account. As Mr. Daly said, the interests of businesses and the electorate can be reflected in the city budget policies, which is the beginning and the end, as you put it, of the entire agenda of the mayor's office. So if you allow me, I would like to ask now Mr. Klimenko, Andrei Klimenko, representing one of the key co-authors of 2025 strategy. So of the 10 issues that listed there, I think it would be quite interesting to talk about the strategic priorities of our city and how they're implemented in the budget policies, how they're going to be implemented, and everything that is around this. Will be interesting to hear about that. Well, no doubt, if you want to hear an answer about strategic priorities, whether they should be taken into account in our budget policies, I think you realize that the answer is quite straightforward. Of course, they have to be taken into account. But on the other hand, the budget policies are not only oriented, are not only for 1 or 2 years. It's becoming long-term now, and it is generated to a large extent within the framework of the city programs. And I think these programs have to be linked to the city development goals. At the very beginning, you asked me how we can resolve the problem within the framework of the budget policies, which is linked, which is due to the actual aging of the city population. So that's one of the trends that we are watching right now. The fact is that we will definitely see the radical transformation of the age structure. I mean, the share of 25 to 35-year-olds will decrease by 30%, and the number of retired people will increase, and those who are aged above 57, actually. So I think strategically we can formulate quite aggressively in this case how we should generate our budget. Should it be geared to the interest of our aging population or to the decreasing number of younger people? Because we are actually relying on this younger generation in the transition to the innovation megapolis, megacity. So in fact, we have to look for a compromise, because as you understand, we are not relieved of social responsibilities to the retired, to the pensioners. But we have to think about the interest of the younger people, orienting towards trying to reorient our activities to provide more support to them, to the new clusters, innovation clusters that have already been generated and that needs to be developed further. And in this sense, our maneuvering can be particularly, especially in the structure of our budget, in state programs. As you can see that there's quite much money are allocated in these areas which are responsible for creating a certain city environment. I mean, the attractive city environment in areas such as healthcare, education, development of transport infrastructure, and the urban infrastructure on the whole. So that's where most capital investment goes to. So, and of course, we cannot expect very fast outcome here, very quick results, although there's a number of investments of course, are directed to support the current expenses. And I think probably this sort of policies will facilitate creation of foundation for future development. There's another point I want to emphasize regarding the interest of our population when we are building our budgets, our urban budgets. I think in terms of openness, transparency, I think the Moscow budget is one of the leaders on the Russian in Russia. So you can enter the relevant website, Moscow government. You will see how the funds are being allocated and spent on different programs. So any citizen can do that on any level, urban level, municipal level, different areas and districts. But of course, we would like to see more active involvement of people in this open budget program. What is especially important here at this point is to take into account the opinion of citizens when formulating the key targets of the state program. Because when we talk about the actual indicators, the performance, we will have to see, first of all, how these funds are spent. And it's not only taking into account the opinion of the city residents, but also control over this in case when we are planning something. So that's briefly everything I wanted to tell you about. Thank you for your comments. I think as part of the issue talking about the future of the 2025 strategy that we've heard from the authors of the strategy. Now we have discussed the viewpoint of the municipal authorities, both Moscow and Chicago authority. So we've discussed the different viewpoints of people who were helping in generating the urban strategy. Now we are ready to hear the people who will actually working in their businesses and paying their taxes are actually financing, funding this initiative. So let's now, let's start with Tatiana or Alexander Mikhailovich, whoever wants to be the first. So just the businesses viewpoint. So the Deputy General Director of Glavstroy, formerly he was holding the same position in the Basel company. Thank you very much. First of all, let me start by saying that I'm really pleased to be among the speakers of this panel discussion. This is a very pleasant, a very interesting forum, and the right issues are raised here. So I think all of us have a chance to think about the future in this sense. I mean, not just everyday issues, immediate things that have to be done now, but we can broaden our horizons in terms of planning. So let me just tell you, probably will take me just 1 minute about our company. Glavstroy is the construction holding of the financial production branch of base element. Holding as one of the key building companies in Russia. The aggregate revenues is over 100 billion rubles, and the workforce is about 20,000. That's the number of personnel working in our company. 4 divisions, 2 of which are related to those project strategies that we were discussing: transportation, construction in the area of transport, Glavmostroy, which is the housing construction, the so-called civil construction division. We also have the developers division, and the cement production division. Quite an important portion of our activities are concentrated in Moscow. Many people in our company work in Moscow. Now, just talking about the problems facing our businesses, first of all, these are, of course, this is an important task of retaining the engineering and scientific potential, the personnel that were trained in Soviet times. So our company is actually an aggregate of former Soviet ministers, Transstroy, the transport ministry, Glavmostroy. That's basically the entire Moscow construction complex that I think, well, at least 75% of all buildings in Moscow were built by this organization. We have 4 design institutes. When I referred to our manpower, first of all, I meant the highly skilled engineers, specialists, and most importantly, what we need to do right now is to retain this workforce. It's an open secret that in post-Soviet time, there have been radical deterioration in this potential in the workforce. It has narrowed down to very low figures, actually. So from this, I would like to go over to the next point, directly related to the budget. Well, talking about business and the jobs that are created in the city. If there are no jobs, as you understand, people will probably want to live in the city, but they won't be able to live here. Therefore, the social task facing our business and the social task facing the city authorities is to extend support, is to give support to different businesses and to create and keep the new jobs. So talking about the actual impact on the budget, so you can go to the Moscow government website, which is very transparent, absolutely clear and comprehensible. So you will be able to see that a great portion of this budget is taken by the income tax paid by people. So that's the greatest portion of this budget that's generated by physical income tax. So in fact, on the level of businesses, there's one problem that I want to mention. Businesses always care about always think about raising the labor productivity, which is actually a kind of equation, which is the revenues divided by the number of personnel. So that's why businesses purely mathematically, of course, find it more profitable when there are less people working in a certain area. And here we are facing a dilemma, as there's a kind of a strategic issue, a balancing between the municipal authorities and the federal authorities in this aspect. So talking about workforce and workplaces, some areas see that a lot of them go, but actually they release in certain areas where new technologies appear. They see that many people leave these areas. In all areas, in all of the city, we see different projects where production facilities are moved outside city limits, or redevelopment of these areas, of these land plots with industrial facilities. So actually the jobs are retained in such areas, because when we redevelop these facilities, we end up with companies of a new type, which become more, I would say, state-of-the-art and more viable. As one of the major developers in the city of Moscow, we are also an active participant in this process. But on the whole, I would like to say that questions of taxation for major businesses such as ours are not a big problem, in fact, because on the whole, the tax system is quite customary, well balanced, and we understand, we know how to work within this system. So most importantly is not to see any radical changes in that. So we would not want to have any radical changes in this system. And what about raising labor productivity? Of course, it is very important for improving the business economies. And from this viewpoint, we, of course, rely very much, and we hope that we will receive support of the municipal authorities in all of our initiatives. And it is quite natural that we are trying to think in longer terms, about longer prospects, because we wouldn't want to see our creations without demand. We don't want our products to be replaced with something different. So summing up, let me say that money is important, of course, but people are more important, and jobs are very important as well. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander Mikhailovich. Well, in fact, I think possibly due to the specifics of your business, we haven't heard any criticism towards the city municipal authorities in terms of the budget policies. But let me ask you one simple question. Talking about your specific business in Moscow, do you feel that there are any reserves, there are any prospects to improve the budget policies in the city government? I mean, do you pay too much tax, or overpaying tax? What is the kind of a workload on the wage tax, and whether the city uses its potential in order to support businesses, and do you think that it's really needed? Because sometimes, you know, the list of these tax benefits, which does not provide any incentives, we feel that sometimes it's just useless. Let me answer as follows. It is true that we have highly skilled people who live and work in Moscow, and we pay all taxes for them. In the area of construction, it's quite natural. Unfortunately, there is competition in Moscow. There are other companies that are possibly they are using some illegal arrangements, and they pay less in tax. But we are trying to be competitive. We are trying to be straightforward, to be honest. And this is our overall approach. I think that we would support any measures to improve the quality of tax administration so that everyone could work in the equal conditions.
I think it's a very important idea, and the continuous competition in the city, and 30% of the people believe that compliance with tax regime is not mandatory, and others have very bleak idea of those tax liabilities. And the idea that those who pay taxes in full, they find themselves in the situation when they are not competitive and have to make up for that with some technology advantages and others. So I think that notion is very important and leads us to the fact that the enhancement of tax regime and an attempt to create a situation of some intolerance to evasion of taxation is really very important, because for those who pay taxes and comply with the tax regime, such improvements would be very desirable, and we have to see the situation when paying taxes will be quite normal. A couple of words about tax discipline in terms of strategy and prospects. Then those businesses who evade paying taxes in full are the most simple businesses and labor-intensive businesses, which are not very much efficient, and we have to move to the environment when most of our businesses are high-tech businesses, because those are the businesses who will really comply with the taxation regime, and better taxation situation and better taxation administering will contribute to favorable conditions for those high-tech companies. And probably it's about technology, but it's something that works for the future. Very interesting deliberation, I would say, and let's move to the presentation of a representative of most numerous class, perhaps not in terms of budget contribution, but in terms of the taxpayers. So I'm turning the floor to Tatiana Krakova, who is the member of the Municipal Assembly, Presnensky. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think that this statement that the city is comfortable for life or viable for life can be set up not only in terms of strategic plans of any mega city, but it is something that is reproduced on a daily basis in specific towns and specific boroughs of cities, neighborhoods, and in the streets. What do I mean? I mean that it's all features such as cleaning, playing grounds, sports grounds in neighborhoods, pavements around buildings, and sufficient number of kindergartens in every neighborhood, and polyclinics, good schools. In terms of education levels, we know that parents bring their kids to distant neighborhoods because schools are good there. And that's also the police efficiency to ensure safety, and parks, squares where people can have recreation safely. And there is a number of other factors, and put together they all determine the valuation of property, both housing and non-housing, and along with exact location and transport convenience. So all those factors put together determine a willingness on the part of the person to live in a specific neighborhood, in a specific borough, and it's well known that people do not come to Moscow, New York City, just to live there. I can tell you from my experience that having stayed in Washington, D.C. and in London when I had business in those cities, I can say that those are the cities which are quite comfortable for life, but there are some specific boroughs or neighborhoods where I would like not only to live, but even to walk into. And it brings me to the importance of the notion that the efficiency and effectiveness of a megacity budget policy largely depends on the implementation of strategic programs. And here, it's the municipal dimension that matters a lot. And speaking of our situation, I don't think that we are quite mature here. And those who had to resolve certain issues with municipal authorities and those who dealt with officials from precincts understand it only too well that those precinct authorities are quite autonomous, and they should rely on the communities who live around, and only through the joint effort they can resolve a number of issues. But those precinct authorities are not accountable to local legislators. And elections in Moscow in this past March, municipal elections I mean, showed us that the Muscovites are deeply interested in streamlining things in their boroughs and neighborhoods. So we heard a number of varying demands and proposals, and the candidates put forward respective programs for their election campaigns, and many authorities have their own agendas, and it leads to the situation that the quality of services are different, and it's not in line with your thesis on the unity and uniformity of life in the city. And based on the budget policy, I think that we should work to improve the budgeting process efficiency in municipalities. And for that end, I think there are 3 steps that can be found important. First, we can set up a unified executive body for each borough precinct. We know that there are 2 actually now. There are authorities that report to the city government, and there are others who are municipalities. If we join the effort, we will avoid then redundancy in control, and costs will reduce costs. And currently the municipalities, and those are the executive bodies of the for local governance, are very much busy in implementing some authority that was delegated from the city level. And sometimes they find it they find it difficult. The second step is the enhancement of legislative power in municipalities. So all authorities that were delegated to the municipalities were delegated to the executive bodies. And this past summer, municipal legislators received authority based on Law 39 of the Moscow city, but those authority was quite limited. It's mostly coordination and recommendations. However, if we try to make our legislatures stronger, municipal legislatures stronger, then the executive bodies would have to report to those legislatures. And my third step is about budget and budgeting. And at this point in time, it's very heavily regulated from above, from the higher authorities, and it's nothing but a cost estimate of expenses and expenditures. And both revenues and spendings and expenditures are already regulated, while revenues is based on some factors and ratios depending on the number of people living there, no matter if all of them pay taxes or pay taxes to the full. So we get only some aggregated and numbers, average numbers. So the scope and quality of services that could be paid from the municipal budget does not depend on the contribution of the people living there. And it concerns everything: roads, streets, playing grounds, sports grounds, traffic control, parking lots, so everything. And I think that in each borough, in each neighborhood, those expenses should depend on specific people's contributions. And it's up to the local authorities to use those funds very efficiently. For instance, the recent introduction of paid parking in downtown Moscow aroused very negative reaction from the people who live there. But I think it could have been perceived quite differently if charges and those payments would have been used for the purposes of budget allocations of the specific municipalities who are located in downtown boroughs. And people, when they see the products of their payments, if they are convinced that their money is used for proper purposes, they wouldn't mind that much. So those are the three steps, or the three areas, as I see them, that we have to work on. And in conclusion, I would like to say that we have some potential in the municipalities to improve the situation and to streamline the situation, but they are the integral part of the common or total city government's policy. And once again, it's about better executive powers and proper reporting system, so that those executive bodies would report not only to the city government, but to local legislatures as well. And secondly, we need to enlarge the taxation base, and we should do that not only through the various ratios or factors, but we need to improve collection of taxes. And the point was made that businesses operating in the specific municipality could pay taxes directly to that budget. Probably it's a right idea. And Mr. Lukin also made a point saying that not all parties are on equal footing, because some companies pay taxes to the full, others don't. And if under these circumstances the municipal budget gets its revenues from local taxes, then they would be more willing to perform well, and the people living in that neighborhood will always go to the polling stations at elections and cast their votes. So, but currently, you know, those who do not pay taxes, they enjoy same rights, and I think it's not correct. Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana Anatolievna. And as a matter of fact, we have just another 10 minutes for Q&A and for voting. But taking my right of being a moderator, I would like to share some more views and that are intertwined with the previous presentations, but I'd like to place some emphasis. And the right point was made that Moscow city and Moscow budget can be the unique proving grounds to test some ideas on improvement of the taxation system. So for any community and any society to develop well, we have to establish a very stable link between people's mentalities and mindsets as consumer of governmental and municipal services, and the responsibility of the same person as a taxpayer. So it's only when we see some labels or price lists, price tags, and only when people understand that they pay for those goods and products from their pocket, they will make right decisions, voting, and they would be much better guided by that information. It's about utility bills, electricity, power, telephone bills. People will see if they really want to pay for the subsidies from their own pockets. And individual taxation contribution is not that much. And we have much more items in the budget which come from not taxation. And from that standpoint, I can say that forced focus here in Moscow on SMEs and on individual taxes is right in terms of strategic and ideological purposes. And since if we redistribute taxation burden is well done, then it will help us to change the minds of the people, and they will really be interested in self-governance. And when a person says that it's him who pays for some renovation or some cleaning, they would be more demanding, and it may sound as some global tasks and objectives, but unless we start doing that right now, it will never happen. And speaking of that link in people's mindsets, fortunately, it's shaped not by some psychiatric doctors, but by some regulation and by services that are provided, and by exemptions that people may have under the right system. And it gives us a unique chance. If we succeed, it will give us a unique chance to influence the federal government as well, because Moscow is too important for the country. And the administration may also welcome that agenda. And thank you.
Now, I would like to ask my colleagues to comment on what has just been said. Let's make it in turns. So maybe you'll have some comments, just a brief remarks. Please, Maxim Gennadievich, you're the first. First thing I would like to note at this point that it's true that we are moving forward together with the federal authorities, so we have common understanding. If we manage to resolve these problems in Moscow, we will be able to resolve these problems in any other regions. So let me say at this point that beginning next year, the physical income tax will be the major source of our budget, and so far we don't feel any changes, but I'm sure the changes are underway. Thanks a lot to Alexander for this idea that strengthening tax administration, I think, is one of the ways to create a competitive environment in the city. As we communicate with businesses, we face different initiatives, and the businesses say, we understand that it's good for conscientious people, but there are only 30% of those. 70% of those say, what are you doing? Let's not deal with that. So we really needed this kind of measures to create a responsible, not something imaginary, but a responsible taxpayer. So also I would like to comment on Tatiana's speech talking about the uniform, the single administration on a district level, but from the viewpoint of reporting of our district authorities, I think probably we need to make a big step forward. Well, some people may think that we have to make many steps, but we have made one important step already. So let's streamline this mechanism, first of all, because on the one hand, you're saying that there's very little authority, so we have to control and to agree on everything. But you should understand that the authority of the Moscow City Duma is to approve the budget and to exercise control over its execution. But this is how we can control the entire urban life. And the principle of division of power, of authority, I think there's quite more potential, much more potential in that right now. So let's try to implement this. As regards the strengthening the income sources, we can approach it in a different way. We have an instruction from our mayor to prepare an act, decree under which we can collect money within the framework of the new patent taxation system, and also collecting the tax from the landlords, those who let their flats. So I think we can do this on the one hand, so we are creating direct interest in that, so we have to be more active in that, and I think that the local government bodies should be more active in that, as they have to push the prefects and the local authorities in districts and different blocks. On the other hand, we understand that these funds will be returned to the city budget, so that city residents should understand that this is not abstract money, but specific funds that can be used to renovate their yards or courtyards or any other facilities. So therefore, I think it's quite good that we're talking about the same things, but we'll probably see different ways to resolve these problems. But that's the question. This is quite important. Any other comments? Just a few words. From the viewpoint of the prospects, it is highly important, as it was emphasized here, to develop the taxation base, developing production facilities, businesses in Moscow, and we need to create a certain environment, favorable environment for that. So first of all, we have to create a more favorable environment to attract innovation businesses. with the jobs that a colleague referred to should be in the area of innovation. Unfortunately, we have less than 20% of those right now. And also redistribution policies that was one of the socialist principles in the Moscow budget. So it is quite clear that the government is moving away from the socialist principle, but there is another danger here, meaning that ghettos will be created, will be established. So we have to orient ourselves towards this increment. Well, probably we need to develop a combined budgeting approach in this area. Richard, please.
Just the man to my left and your right is the honesty of business leaders and how tax policy has to be certain and open and transparent. The United States is going through a huge federal government tax policy. We're discussing the same issues in a different way. And the other speaker here, the woman, talked about the concerns of citizens. And that is that you have to allow deputies to be able to work in regions. As cities get bigger, you have to have your deputies of the executive branch have responsibility for those areas. And they meet with each other. If there's 40 or 50 deputies dealing with areas of the city, the problems are the same. And you have to be able to make sure your deputies work on Saturdays when the people are off. Very interesting. And they feel like a relationship. I worked every Saturday as mayor of the city of Chicago, because when the people are working during the week, they see you on weekends. And thirdly, if you go to China, you go to a room like this and you look down, and that's their city. It'd be like Chicago. And they say, here's what's going to happen in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And you give the opportunity to citizens knowing that the planning is there and the execution is going to be there. And those who turn their back on globalization will be lost in this century. China is spending $600 billion this year. Rail, airports, ports. Why? They want to be part of the world. And we have the same problem that Russia has. We're not spending enough money on infrastructure. We think we have good infrastructure, but if you go to cities and the rest of our country, we do not. Infrastructure has to be built as quickly as possible, be able to connect with the world and connect internally with your cities and regions. The longer you delay this, the much more difficult it becomes to raise the money, and that's why I think they have to come up with a strong national and local policy of infrastructure money coming from the outside with accountability and guidelines.
Thank you. Спасибо. Александр, короткая реплика.
Alexander, just a brief comment on what I quite agree with the latest statement about the importance of infrastructure, and I think that this is what realistically can help businesses and what can determine where businesses remain and where they work in the longer prospect. Thank you. Tatiana, please. I just wanted to ask about the physical income tax, whether it should be exempt from the rental payments. So, well, I'm sure that there are people here or letting out or renting flats, how they should compensate the physical income tax. So you can do it in accordance with the tax code. So you have to file your tax return and to indicating what you actually paid for that. So and that's how we can control these funds later on. So you're referring to some future time. So until now, nobody has done this so far. Nobody has had any allowances. Well, talking about the incomes here, well, the revenues will, tax revenues will get in 2013. Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, we have no time, running out of time for voting, but we actually managed to use this time for exchange of opinions, and despite differences in our opinions in different areas, nevertheless, we have come to a set of different decisions that are being implemented right now, and hopefully will facilitate more efficient city budget policies on municipal level, on urban level, and its interaction with the federal authorities. Thank you very much.